then how should we deal with the problem coming up in the Western countries, in the United States, in terms of Brexit, in terms of all the protests and populism spreading around Europe, which is also a global problem, which reminds me to some extent also to the complex of globalization, which came up from tech revolution in the second half of the 19th century, which we are having again now recently. AI is on the way, big data, which make people to be richer and richer, and the winner takes all, made increasing inequality to happen, which made people to be fed up and going to the street. And luckily in the United States, we still have democratic order so that people can vote for Donald Trump. Without that, people simply going to the street for having a coup. Right? Maybe, right? Yeah.
Look, having problems doesn't mean that the situation is bad. Having problems means you're challenged, you have a task to solve. That's all. Problems are there to be resolved. And if you look back to the situation go back to 1945. If you look at 1945, we had much severer problems. And people regarded them as a task to be resolved. Was resolved not perfectly well for everybody, but in the end, we have a better world since then. The liberal world order benefited all of us. The way countries manage their affairs is to the advantage of practically everybody.
Yeah, but I'm talking about maybe not necessarily after 1945.
I know,
around.
But you have to look at 1945 in order to compare, in order to understand what has happened.
Yeah, maybe around
since 1945, we have had our share of problems. 1989 was an enormous problem in Europe.
Yeah.
And the end was we resolved the problem. You cannot resolve every problem. Sometimes it ends in a catastrophe. The Second World War, the First World War, the Korean War, whatever, Vietnam War. But by and large, the fact that you have a problem doesn't mean that you're in a fix. It means you're challenged by a task. So you say, okay, you have problems in so many democracies, you have populist parties rising. So what? This is part of the process. We're alive. The world is changing. We are changing. Our outlook on the world is changing. That's not a bad thing. That's the world. It's not any reason to be despondent. I hear you want to interrupt me because you want to show that you're desperate because the world is black and black. No, it's not black. Look. I mean, how many people live today in the world and live a better life than much less people 100 years or 1,000 years ago? We have improved.
Which requires one precondition that democratic system is mature, is well established, is resilient. Look, for example, if we try to look at 1929, when the economic crisis, when depression happens, when we look at around the time towards the end of the 19th century, when all these workers went to the streets, they are also unhappy, and then which made First World War to happen. 1929, the depression made Hitler to come up, right? In Germany, Hitler, he didn't make a coup to get power. He was also to some extent democratically elected by voters who were not mature, who are not enlightened in your wording. That's something which I care about. So tell me whether the Western liberal democratic order is resilient now, despite so many problems: Donald Trump, Brexit, populism.
Again, problems are not a sign that things are in a fix and unresolvable. They are a task. That is all. So, democracy is not something that reaches a certain stage and then it's perfect. Democracy has evolved from the days of the Greeks 2,500 years ago. It has gradually evolved. And why should it be perfect the way we have it now? It is also changing. Ask so many people who are in the streets whether they're satisfied with democracy as we have it. No, well, they tell you. Politicians are dumb and stupid. They don't understand how to do things. Our democracy doesn't work. They want to change it, and they're right. They're right. Of course, democracy has to develop further. That is part of the task. We have to make our democracy so bring it into such a shape that it's able to deal with the problems that we have on our hands. Now you say, okay, in 1929, actually it was the world financial crisis, world economic crisis, democracies fail. Yes, failure is always an option. Not one willingly subscribed to, but things can go wrong. Let's not forget that. There's always a danger, but the fact that we know things can go wrong must motivate us, must get us think even more on how to resolve the problems we have in our hands. Are our institutions resilient enough? You asked that 3 times, I think, already. Of course they are. They have already managed so many crises. We have withstood enormous crises. Just mentioned the world economic crisis of 1929. Well, think of the world financial crisis of 2008-2009. That could have been a disaster. Had our institutions not had the resilience, and had we not had the right people in place who knew what they were doing and who resolved the crisis. Yes, our institutions are resilient. That doesn't mean that you can't have misfortune, the wrong people at the wrong time. Yeah, Donald Trump is definitely no Hitler, but he's definitely the wrong person at the wrong time in the wrong place.
Yeah, but people voted for him.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah,
Of
simply
course.
because people are having problem,
Yes.
economic problem
Of course.
in their daily life. So you are still optimistic about what's going on.
It's
with,
not a question of optimism or pessimism. It's a question of rationally analyzing the situation that we have. If people vote for Donald Trump, they have a reason. But it's not all Americans are behind Donald Trump. No. Enough people voted for him in order to have him as president.
Yeah,
Okay, so that shows there is something deeply wrong in American society.
But it's a very slow and a gradual process of the increasing inequality based on tech revolution, based on globalization complex.
Yes.
Which means winner
Yes.
takes all. Winner takes all. Now we have 1% top rich people. They own already 1/3 of the wealth, global wealth.
that's got to
which
change.
is if something can be changed like that, then people will be getting increasingly fed up.
Yeah,
Then
but
they are-
Michael,
I'm thinking of what's going on in 20
the world
years.
doesn't function by having a person drawing up a plan and then changing the world according to the plan. The world changes according to many factors of influence. And something like people electing someone like Donald Trump is one influence factor on the development of American democracy. So far, American institutions have been surprisingly resilient versus a person with the personality of Trump who doesn't respect its institutions or anything. But will it continue? Will they continue to be resilient? We don't really know. And we can be optimists or pessimists, it doesn't matter at
Yeah.
all. What we have to watch out for and try to influence with our little means that we have is that these institutions in the United States evolve in a way which makes in the future people like Donald Trump impossible to take the presidency. That may work, may not work.
Yeah.
But the whole way the world evolves is something that is a great and very complex process. We influence it, as I just said, in our very minuscule ways, and others influence it in much greater ways. Corporations influence it. Yes, Google influences the way the world evolves. But if you analyze well, I think you will find that the institutions that are now under threat, in many countries more than in others, these institutions still hold up relatively well. They are under threat, but they manage to defend themselves. They show they're resilient, and well, let's see. We are observers. Let's see whether in the end they will manage that. But there is no basis for saying because now so many things go wrong, things will go even more wrong in the future, and there will be a catastrophe. No, there is also opposition to negative developments.